This is TWIS, This Week in Science, episode number 733, recorded on Wednesday, August 7th, 2019. What the TWIS? Twist the if? Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight I'm going to fill your head with a loving stomach, chimeras, and some big ifs. But first,
TWIS is supported by listeners like you. We thank you for your support. We really couldn't do it without you.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. The following disclaimer has been interrupted. What? To bring this important message on behalf of humans everywhere. Enough with the gun violence. Enough with weapons meant for war in the hands of troubled men and boys. Enough with empty thoughts and insincere prayers. And enough with rhetoric of hate speech. Enough of racism. There's nothing uniquely American about racism. It's something ignorant people have in common with other ignorant people all over the world. Racism is not an American ideal. It is the opposite of our ideals. Yes, racism fed and clothed this country through centuries of a slave economy. Racism gained us this land by ethnic slaughter and genocide of its native peoples. Racism built this country through waves of immigrants who worked harder for less in order to become Americans. And while the ideals of freedom and equality have for most of our history seemed hypocritical to our actions as a nation, it is because they were ideals deemed so noble, more noble than the men who wrote them and more noble than the nation born from it, that the ideals of equality and freedom were written into our foundation. Our idealism as a nation has eventually led us to become the most ethnically diverse nation on earth, and there's nowhere else that I would rather be than right here on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We're back again, but this is not just any old episode of This Week in Science. This is a very special episode of This Week in Science. So hold on to your science tinfoil hats, everyone, because this week we are joined by the hosts of the What the If podcast. Welcome to the show, Philip Shane and Matt Stanley. Thanks for joining us.
I'm very excited to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
So
This
glad
is
to have
surreal
you.
to me because I'm always watching this, albeit delayed, but because it's very late here in the East Coast. But to see my face, I don't know. It's like, what? Somehow
It's like fan fiction. You've inserted yourself into a favorite podcast.
Exactly.
We love to make the sciencey dreams come true. Oh,
Yes.
this is going to be so much fun. I'm excited. So what we're doing tonight, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have our normal science of the week, but we're also going to be iffing it up a little bit. Could one of you tell me a little bit about who you are and what your podcast is all about?
Philip Shane is a documentary filmmaker. I am a historian of science. I teach at NYU. And our shtick is we take reality and we change something. And then we run with it and see where that takes us. So sometimes we'll turn off gravity or say what had happened if Isaac Newton had never lived. And then we run with it until usually we destroy the universe.
Yeah.
So tonight on the show, we are not just talking about the science. We are going to talk about the science. The TWIS team, we're going to bring our normal stories. We've got a few stories for you to open up the show. But then we're going to play the if game. And I guess we're going to destroy the universe. So are we ready for that? Is everyone ready?
Yeah. You've heard of dark energy. We're if energy. You've heard of black holes. We're if holes.
Yeah. Right.
It's a late night show, right? At least over here.
Late night. If it.
It's
All
safe
right.
harbor somewhere.
As we jump into the show, everyone, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to the TWIS podcast and also the What the If podcast, all the places that great podcasts are found. You can also look for more TWIS goodness by visiting twis.org. Okay, let's jump into some science. This last week, some huge news came out in the what are we doing with science world? We've talked about chimeras before on the show. But this last week, July 31st, a Spanish newspaper called El País reported that an international team of Spanish researchers and also American researchers had taken to China to do experiments in China because they aren't allowed because of restrictions here in the United States. The lead researchers, Juan Carlos Ispizua Belmonte of the Salk Institute in San Diego. And we've talked about his research before. Back in 2017, he and some other researchers had published work where they had put human cells into pigs and cows to see if we could create human pig livers, human pig hearts, to see if what we could get to, to survive in these chimeric organisms. The way that the science works is an embryo is of, say, a pig or a cow, any animal is taken, little baby, the embryo with all the basic cells, the blastocyst. Some cells are removed and some human cells are put in. If you're early enough in that division process of differentiation, then nothing's really decided what it's going to be yet. It is just a ball of cells. And so those human cells could end up anywhere in the body. If you wait till later in differentiation, you can potentially specify where those cells will end up, like a particular organ. They did this. Then you take that embryonic ball of cells and you put it into a surrogate parent in which the pregnancy goes to term to see how far it can go. They were able to get pigs, cows to hold human cells to become chimeric, but it didn't work really well. And so they wanted to do something more closely related to humans. Primates are really closely related to humans, and the next step was to do human-monkey chimeras. However, like I said, this kind of research is restricted in the United States. It is not allowed. A lot of people are worried what would happen if a monkey got human cells in its brain. What would that mean? What would end up happening? There's a lot of ethical issues that need to be worked out there. And the researchers, wanting to move ahead, decided they'd go to China. And it's been reported that they have successfully gotten human-monkey chimeric embryos that they've allowed to survive to the 1 or 2 week stage. This research has not yet been published, so this is just this kind of word-of-mouth reporting on this. A paper will probably be out soon, so nobody's really talking about it. They're all pretty tight-lipped, but we just know that it's happened. There's a lot of
yeah, chimera. What a chimera! I have some vision of like an old, like there was a chess game, like kind of like on the Millennium Falcon. There were animals, and it was the chimera. It's like the head of one thing and the body of another. Is that where they get that term?
Right. So that's where the term comes from, where it's this mixture of animals, mixture of organisms. But in the idealized world that we could create a chimeric organism that has human cells in very specific locations, like the pancreas is all human. And so we have a bunch of pigs growing human pancreases that can then be transplanted into humans when they're needed, because we have we have an organ shortage when it comes to organ transplants. So if we could grow them.
Yeah. This immediately leads me to have this idea of this book now I want to write about lab monkey chimeras getting free and then sort of surviving past the nuclear apocalypse. And then there's in the future, there's these monkeys who have rebuilt society.
Oh, no, that's already a thing.
No. They did there was one, I think, but it was apes. which is
Right,
different.
Planet of
This
the
time they'll
Apes,
have
maybe?
tails.
That's right. That'll be Planet of the
This time
Monkey.
they'll have tails.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is totally different.
I'm running off to protect the Statue of Liberty. So all I know is that it turns out bad for the Statue of Liberty.
So, Dr. Kiki, did I understand right from your explanation that it doesn't matter what kind of human cells we put in? What's important is where they get put into the blastocyst?
Right. So it's double. So we're putting very early stage, basically pluripotent stem cells. These very early stage human cells that still have the ability to turn into anything. If you're putting them in to a very early embryo, then you want them to match the timing of that embryonic stage for developmental purposes. But then they can go on and kind of become anything. The other side of it is if you wait a little longer and you're putting them into a specific location, you want the cells to, again, kind of match the differentiation pathway. So you want cells that are potentially on their way to already becoming a liver and not something else. Because if you put them in a particular location, are you gonna end up with, I don't know, a heart where the liver should be? Will the body plan get messed up? Will the embryo be? Will that end up unviable if the timing isn't correct?
Interesting.
Well, in keeping with the disclaimer this week, I don't want to be xenophobic and simply afraid of these things because the images are disturbing. Is it possible that we could come to a time where it's not really, we don't have to think of differences in species? It's just, we can all be mixed up. It's just
genes.
Genes, yeah.
Yeah, it's just genes. And so that brings me kind of to the next study, one of our favorite organisms. The tardigrade has all these amazing genes for survival. It has genes that allow it to withstand radiation from space. It has genes that allow it to survive in very cold environments, very hot environments. It is it's a very long-lived organism, very hardy. They don't die. Their genomes fix themselves very readily when it comes to damage. And so the tardigrades, we're interested in how they fix themselves, because if we could learn how the genes in the tardigrades work, they could teach us a lot about how to fix our own cancers. Could we take some tardigrade genes and potentially just swap them in, use CRISPR gene editing, make some little alterations? Isn't it just all genetic information there?
So this is
tardigrades. Why do they have built-in protection against radiation?
Because they're aliens. It's considered a silly thing to talk about, but I secretly, not so secretly, believe that they are in fact aliens.
Yeah, but part of it, I would imagine, has to do with the fact that they are, they're also named water bears. They like to live in water and lichen.
Like water.
And one thing that lichen does is it can be, up on shore for a while, and it can get totally, completely dried out, and then it'll get wet again later, and it's sort of a seasonal thing. So being able to be completely dehydrated and then exposed to the sun
for what, like 100 years or something?
It's like an insane amount of time.
They were in a ton state. They were in this shriveled up state for like 100 years, and then they were reanimated.
But to survive in that state, just normal radiation without being able to do DNA repair that a living thing would normally you would assume be doing, you would have to have that component to exist, to even be on the planet.
Or to be on the moon. So, yes, the tardigrades in this story were taken to the moon by an Israeli company that was going to put a lander on the moon.
Sure.
Do you know what happened to that lander?
Did it explode?
It kind of landed roughly. It crashed into the moon. And
it did an autopilot landing, I guess, or unpiloted landing, I guess is what it would be, right?
It boofed.
It did. Mm-hmm. And it potentially boofed all of its contents onto the surface of the moon. The contents which consisted of some tardigrades.
Oh.
The researchers who were involved in this potential experiment of putting the tardigrades on the moon, because they wanted to know how the tardigrades would be able to withstand the radiative, cold environment of the moon. They had a plan for what they were going to study there, except it was sped up. The tardigrades may have been completely exposed very rapidly to the lunar environment, which, as hardy as they are, it may have been hard for them to have survived the crash. But if the crash and their exposure was at a slow enough pace, they could have gotten into their ton state and gone dormant. And if they're dormant on the moon, they could exist on the surface of the moon for who knows how long. So the Israeli lander site is now one of some a lot of curiosity, actually, to find out what happened to those tardigrades.
So you're telling us that some possibly indestructible, possibly alien life forms have escaped the planet?
They're kosher.
Yes.
It's okay. They're kosher.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, if we're talking about panspermia,
This is how it starts.
This is reverse panspermia. We caused it in this instance.
And they
So
are
you could also have this thing in a ton state on the moon, and then you could have like a teeny tiny little comet or something hit there that had some ice on it, and then it melts, and then they open up, and then there's a whole thing on the moon.
But I'm guessing they were in. Were they in the tin state, the frozen state, basically? I would assume they were on this while on the satellite.
No, apparently they were not in the ton state going on the satellite. Apparently they were in a moist environment that would have allowed them to stay in their lively water bear state.
That is a rude awakening.
Yeah.
So it could have been flash frozen water bears, or or they could have survived. But we don't
What
know.
about the vacuum is not a problem for them then?
No, if
Yeah, it's amazing.
in the vacuum of space.
Right, that's right. Yeah, that's insane.
Yep.
vacuum
Aliens, I'm telling you.
And I'm not sure they're kosher. One of their nicknames is Moss Pig.
Oh, well,
I'm not sure if that disqualifies them.
that explains why there was no milk on the.
But now we have to figure out, like, how many millennia before there's the rise of the tardigrades on the moon?
That's right, and they come back to invade us, right?
Yeah, except they got the scale completely wrong, right? Because they're still really teeny tiny, and so.
Yeah.
But scientifically, this is like incredible. Yeah. Right.
So
So
if-
we have to. Are they gonna? Is somebody sending another craft to go land there and see what happened?
To go
Or people.
scrape.
People. Yeah.
People will
long
have to
time.
go there. I mean, this is going to be something that will probably be in the plans to get
Yeah.
there at some point. I don't know about future Israeli plans. They do want to go back.
Yeah.
And they showed they could get there, and it was just a small error that ended up having them crash. So I hope they go back and check the site. But if not, it's up for investigation by anyone who gets people to the moon to look at
Elon.
it. Yeah, get there.
But this is a good reminder of the reason for planetary protection.
Yep.
Policies, because if that was Mars, I mean, they could. Now,
Since it's the moon,
Right.
since it's the moon, we think, oh, it's dead. We don't really have to worry about it. There's probably
Right.
nothing there. It doesn't have an atmosphere. It's, it's cold, it's icy, whatever. Mars, we're looking for life there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, another thing,
Exactly.
alien-wise, like it is kind of amazing to think that we crashed a ship that had living things on it. There's no reason why aliens might not have crashed somewhere. I mean, not Roswell, but
Area 51. I'm
But like
not
these
gonna
little-
go run there.
right. Like they're, if our space station crashed, there's all kinds of biological things on it, not to mention the people, but the food and then all the experiments they have, the lettuce, things like that.
Right. I do wonder about Kevin Unique in the chat room just brought up Too Late About Mars. We've already visited there, and that is true. So we know that there are microbes that managed to survive in our supposedly clean rooms at NASA. We know that there are microbes that can survive radiation and exposure to cold in space. We just don't know if they went and if they lived on the exterior of our craft and made it through the landing process.
Of course they did. Of course.
Without being burned off in the process.
Of course they did. I mean, does Mars have one of those really big burn-off atmospheres? The moon certainly doesn't.
It's a bit, but it's not. I mean, it has enough of an atmosphere for us to use a parachute.
Right. There's 1% of our...
There's a heat shield.
It's 1% of our atmosphere?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not going to be a big deal. That's not a big fight. And if you're somewhere you're in the interior, and it's going to be an extremophile of some form because it survived all the sanitation efforts.
Oh, great! So it's fundamentalist.
Clean room.
Great.
It's going to be a survivor.
Yeah, this is going to be a Jeff Goldblum. Life will find a way kind of.
Yeah, it's also going to be very mad. I mean,
life will survive.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on forward.
And it's going to have no competition. And that's the thing we forget. It's going to be now in an environment.
But competition is what drives so much of the diversification.
But they're going to have to eat each other.
No, they'll have
speciate.
a niche with no predator.
Yeah.
And so they
boring.
can diversify into those niches too.
Yeah.
If there's something, there's resources everywhere that aren't being taken advantage of, there can be evolution into them.
Okay, well, let's keep moving. I finished my stories. These are great conversations to have. Justin, let's run through your stories.
Okay, let's run through them real quick. Okay, if you are a young man in the United States, there is something you need to be aware of. There's a danger so great that it has become a leading cause of death for men 20 to 35, right behind drug overdoses, car accidents, suicide, homicide, heart disease, cancer. Top cause of death, 20 to 35, behind all those. Police violence. Who knew? Well, if you are black in America, you might. If you're black in America, you have 2.5 times more likely chances of being killed by law enforcement than if you're a white person of the similar age. 1 in 1,000 black men will die by police violence in their lifetime, according to this study, which is published in PNAS and examined fatality risks during police encounters. One of the interesting things about this study is that this is journalism based. This is not from records kept by police departments, because apparently those papers do not exist in any great detail or with much continuity across the nation. So they pulled this from reportings on police shootings across the nation between 2013 and 2017. They had a total of 11,456 death by police in those 4 years. Some of the interesting things here too: men generally have a 1 in 2,000 chance of being murdered by police in their lifetime. 1 in 2,500 if you happen to be a white man. If you happen to be a woman, women, it's 1 in 33,000. So there's a massive increase in the chances of being killed by police if you're a man than a woman. Of women, Native American women were 1.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white women. Latino men and Native American men 1.5 times more likely to be killed than white people by police. Something interesting: Latina women, as is defined here, 20% less likely to be killed by police than white women, for whatever reason is there. Black women, 1.4 times more likely than white women to be killed at the hands of police. What's sort of interesting, they go a little bit into the Bureau of Justice statistics needs to develop a more comprehensive system to track police-related deaths, because basically what they're seeing is a increase by as much as 50% since 2008 in overall death by police in our nation. So there is a problem. There's a definite racial component to it that is obvious and standing out. But there's also just why are so many of us getting killed by police? This is obviously, I would probably say that this might lead to looking at the militarization of our police and their trainings as a nation. But definitely something that needs better research and to be looked into because it's climbing the charts for causes of death of young men in this country. Moving on, dark matter.
Well, I was going to say, before you move forward with this, I think another point here is that it's the best thing is that there are people doing studies on this, that people are looking at data, because it's always a question of, are we just seeing more of this on social media? Are we just seeing more of this because of whatever modern factors, or, what is actually happening? And so it is nice to see some scientific rigor put toward this question of whether or not police force is resulting in more deaths for some segments of the population. And this is something that needs more work, and it needs a big old spotlight put on it. So it's something that people that more people become aware of. So we know it's a problem and it becomes investigated more.
And I think there's another lens to use when looking at this, which is that there's increased death at the hands of police in these different subsections. Mm-hmm. Is that specific to, is that expectation or the reason that that's happening specific to the police force? Or is that society as a whole? Or is that another larger group of people that police are a part of? So it could be that the police force in general has a greater expectation for violence from certain communities. Or it could be people in general have that expectation, or that males in general have that expectation, or that white people in general have that expectation. So there's all these different potential kind of Venn diagrams of what we're looking at. And depending on which one of those things is actually the real true correlation, there's different ways to attack that problem.
Yeah. The problem of, the question of why is this happening? I mean, but now there's a bit of evidence saying, yes, indeed, the people who are saying brown people are getting killed more often, they're right. It's happening. And so let's move forward.
And is it the training of police, or is it the way that we teach people from a very young age how to treat other people? Where is this
happening from?
I would say, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I would guess that it's the training, that the training is supposed to account for all kinds of human emotions, right? And that there is a weakness in the training, a lack of seriousness in taking into account these things are happening. And maybe the fact that the statistics are coming out more often is helpful. The fact that the community is aware of these things and so will fight, will protest is also very helpful. But the training can make this work, but it requires the fact that the police feel in danger. And so it seems to happen all the time. So the police felt in danger. It wasn't, I'm going to say look, there's some really overtly horrible racist things, and we see that in New York for sure, occasionally. But I think other times they're scared and they're shooting. And then the fact that they can, they're not tried for that or convicted, anything, I think is probably because they're saying the training was weak, but that's a huge problem. Because that fact that the training is not a person makes this very hard to change.
If you know they're taking those prejudices into the training at the beginning, right? If they're carrying that with them into the training, that's attacked very different than if it's a problem within the training. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, in the military, they take a lot of it. Now, certainly terrible things happen in the military as well, but it's all about fighting the emotions. You have a method of doing things. And if you violate that method, you are in trouble. Then they really can say you did that wrong, Yeah.
So in the last 60 years, the city of Los Angeles has burned twice because of the issue of racial justice
racial relations.
at the hands of police specifically in relation
yeah.
to the police was very specifically behind both of those. And one thing that's happened since the advent of everybody having this video camera in their hand everywhere, we haven't seen more clear evidence of the UFOs, the ghosts, the Bigfoots. But guess what? Police violence against people of color has definitely shown up on our screens over and over and over and over again. So, this study, along with what we've been seeing, it's not that we're just seeing it more often because there's video now or that it's happening more often. It's not happening more often. It's been going on for
It's been going on. Yeah.
It's just we're becoming
it's happening a lot
in the white people world. That's all. That's what's
I did like how you said, whatever the last statistic you mentioned, you said this many of us are being killed. And I think that's important. It is this many of us. It's not
us.
this, them, and them. And, yeah.
Yeah, the idea that crime is actually been going down over the years, and yet police violence on people is going up. There's something going on in that culture.
All right, now let's move on to your dark matter story.
Now just something much lighter. Dark matter, invisible, gravitationally active mystery matter. It's making up some 80%-ish of our universe's mass. It might be a lot older than anybody thought possible. This is Johns Hopkins University study published in Physical Review Letters. They're presenting an idea of how dark matter might have been born and how to identify it. This is Tommy Tinkanen, postdoc in physics and astronomy at Johns Hopkins University and the study's author. The study revealed, this is quoting voice, study revealed a new connection between particle physics and astronomy. If dark matter consists of new particles that were born before the Big Bang, they affect the way galaxies are distributed in the sky in a unique way. This connection may be used to reveal their identity and make conclusions about times before the Big Bang as well. So, not a lot is known currently about the origins of dark matter, but it does play a crucial role in the physics of the formation of the galaxies and clustering of galaxies. Not directly observable, but this is one of the things in the study. So, for a long time, there has been theorized that dark matter is a leftover substance from the Big Bang. That this was an affect of the Big Bang that it left over this dark mattery residue. And so researchers have been looking for this version of dark matter, but so far experimental searches have come up with zilch, zero, nada, and a healthy slice of bupkis. So quoting again Tim Cannon, if dark matter were truly a remnant of the Big Bang, then in many cases researchers should have seen a direct signal of dark matter in different particle physics experiments already. And using a new, and by the author's definition, simple mathematical framework. I doubt it's that simple. The study shows that dark matter may have been produced before the Big Bang during an era known as the cosmic inflation, when space was expanding very rapidly, which I have to pause it right here.
I
thought that was after.
After.
Right.
I thought that was after
Bang.
the Big Bang. And they're saying like the cosmic expansion, like the Big Bang happened like after that?
What was the source?
No.
What magazine is this? Or is
So this
the reporter?
was published in Physical Review Letters.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like perhaps one of the reporters along the line
got something
transposed
confused,
some
but
words.
they have said over and over again in this, before the Big Bang. This is not a...
So, rapid expansion is believed to have led to copious production of certain types of particles called scalars. So far, only one scalar particle has been discovered. This is the, of course, Higgs boson. And quoting voice again, we do not know what dark matter is, but if it has anything to do with scalar particles, it may be older than the Big Bang. With the proposed mathematical scenario, we don't have to assume new types of interactions between visible and dark matter beyond gravity, which we already know is there. So a new study shows researchers have overlooked a simple, again, by their definition, mathematical scenario for the origin of dark matter. And the study also suggests that there may be a signature on the distribution of matter in the universe that can be somewhat predicted and therefore telegraph what dark matter is. Last quoting voice, while this type of dark matter is too elusive to be found in particle experiments, it can reveal its presence in astronomical observations. We will soon learn more about the origin of dark matter when the Euclid satellite is launched in 2012. It's going to be very exciting to see what it will reveal about dark matter.
2012.
Or 2022.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of time.
No, 2022. No, it's just right around the corner.
Right.
And its findings can be used to peek into the times perhaps before the Big Bang.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
some of the ideas are that the universe is like a yo-yo that goes out and then it crashes back down and then it expands out and it crunches back down. And if it is a yo-yo like that, then there should potentially be some kind of trace that ties it all together. So we could, if the math, the physics, the language of the universe works out, be able to find that thread now that would connect us to that pre-Big Bang epoch.
And I don't know that this requires a yo-yo universe in order
Not necessarily,
for it to operate.
but yeah, that's one idea.
Yeah.
the strange thing is there's something clearly confusing here, which is this whole before the Big Bang thing, because everything that came out of the Big Bang is everything we have. So theoretically, everything that's here is also from before the Big Bang, maybe.
There's a lot of weird stuff going on here.
Right.
Yeah. So that's I mean, it's like I just feel like I got the wrong info at first, but the expansion of space and the scalar particles being part of this formed or affected there, and then the Big Bang takes place.
Unless what they're talking about, there's
not how I learned it.
There's whatever the bang. The little bang,
right?
And then
the little
bit of inflation, and then the Big Bang, which is massive inflation. So maybe looking at how it inflated.
There's some time marker there, not
right? Yeah, and I should say Big Bang is actually not a technical term, right?
No.
That's a loose term used to describe a whole category of theories and possible events. So it may be that we're just talking about different timescales in the very early universe.
I would hate to think that the before the Big Bang thing was used to get publicity.
Impossible.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, right? I mean, it's...
sounds like a possibility. One possibility.
Yeah, but you know what? People got a lot of publicity out of there was nothing before. So, it took a while to get publicity the other way.
Right. Fair, what do they call that? Fair time. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's come out of this conundrum of time and space and spend a couple of minutes with our favorite Blair's Animal Corner.
It's Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
What you got, Blair?
Oh my goodness. I come to you from this location full of African megafauna to talk about starfish.
Yay, starfish!
So the most amazing story came out of Queen Mary University of London about starfish and oxytocin. So we talk about oxytocin on the show all the time and the various communications that it gives our body. It is the love hormone, the cuddle bug, whatever you want to call it. It's something that spikes when we see animals with very large eyes, makes us feel nurturing, makes us calm, makes us feel loved, all this good stuff, right? Well, turns out that starfish, specifically the crown of thorns starfish, is also affected by oxytocin. So the crown of thorns starfish in particular, feeds on coral and has a really bad impact on the Great Barrier Reef because the Great Barrier Reef has all this other stress going on from ocean acidification, sea level rise, sea level temperature change, all this sorts of stuff is having an impact on these corals. And so extreme predation that might normally be okay is having a pretty large impact on the reef. So in an effort to see what kind of makes this specific starfish tick, they wanted to see how the starfish responded to oxytocin type molecules. It turns out that they have kind of an important role in their digestion. So in this study, they took some starfish and they injected oxytocin into them. And within a few minutes, the starfish did something that I will describe. And before I describe it, let me just say this is a normal starfish behavior. Okay. So they kind of humped up where the center of their body was above all of their legs. And then they expelled their stomach out of their mouth. When starfish eat, they go up on top of like a mussel, for example. They will use their hydraulic, teeny tiny suction cup feet to pry open an oyster or a mussel. They're very, very, very strong. When they do that, then they throw up their stomach out of their mouth into the mussel or the oyster. Then they digest the soft tissue of the mussel or oyster outside of their body in the shell of the oyster or the mussel until it becomes soup-like. You're welcome. Hopefully no one's eating soup right now. Then they can draw it all back up into their body all at once and go on their way and leave just a mussel shell or an oyster shell. So this is how starfish eat. So the oxytocin, when they injected them with oxytocin, they started showing this feeding behavior. They humped up like they were on top of a mussel. They threw up their stomach. And they just kind of waited there like they were digesting food. So there's some sort of signal through oxytocin that is telling them that there's food around or that it's time to eat. So there's something being triggered there. It also made starfish 2 to 3 times slower at righting themselves if you flip them over. Which if you flip them over and they were eating a mussel, they might not stop. They might continue to digest that mussel, suck their stomach back in, and then rewrite themselves. So this all makes sense with the expectation that oxytocin is a signal that is related to digestion in starfish. Why this is interesting in particular is not just that the cues from this hormone are so different in us and in starfish, but that they found receptors all over the starfish's body, in their central nervous system and in their stomach. Now, keep in mind, starfish don't have brains. They have kind of this nerve net along their whole body. So they don't have equivalent structures in terms of nervous system necessarily as we have. But this means oxytocin has important roles in their body, and that this is consistent with the fact that we have hormone channels for oxytocin in our body, which means that this role of oxytocin in general in an animal's body is very, very old. The other thing that's really interesting about this is, remember I said at the beginning that the Great Barrier Reef is being impacted by this crown of thorns starfish. So if we know that this could slow down the starfish movement in general, but also confuse them into eating in the wrong place or mess with their digestion, or if you reduce oxytocin, if you inhibit oxytocin, will that stop them from eating? There's all these potential applications to help reduce the predation on the coral reefs. So there's kind of this two-pronged, very interesting approach here. Oxytocin channels are very old, could be, hundreds of millions of years.
When did they change? Yeah, when did they change from being vomit out your stomach to digest stuff to "I love you"? When did oxytocin make that switch?
And another question that's probably totally unscientific and totally unrelated is cute aggression, right? We've talked on the show about how oxytocin actually makes you want to eat babies. So is that related, or is that totally coincidental? Be very interesting to explore.
From now on, I'm just going to say I'm going to vomit my stomach all over that baby. No.
Yeah.
But what this is a reminder of is that life itself,
out of my mouth.
life itself is very stupid. Life requires a drug to tell it to eat, to tell it to reproduce, to tell it to love.
So remember, the starfish does not have a brain. They have rudimentary eyes and they smell with their feet.
Yeah.
So they are used to being like, food over there, food closer, on food. So life is stupid if you don't have this multi-sensory thought process of, that smells like there's shrimp next door. I should walk over and check and see if there's shrimp. Oh, there is shrimp. Does it look like it was cooked well? It does. I'm going to eat some, right? So there's many steps in between that. And in this case, there's some sort of hormone channel that's signaling to them to do this thing that's kind of weird. They throw their stomach up out of their mouth. So they probably shouldn't do that if it's not the right time, because then, I don't know, a fish could wander by and bite off part of their stomach, and that could affect their survival. So you don't want them to do that. Yeah, when it's like a lap band, but in this case could be pretty bad. So yes, you're right. They need to be told when to eat, but also in the ocean, that's kind of an important thing.
Well, I was just going to point out, but that's not unique. That happens with humans. Yeah. Most humans go, I'm getting hungry. I'm
in love. I'm hungry.
Right. There's all these chemical signals in the brain telling you to do things, throughout not just in the brain, throughout your body, telling you commanding the overorganism to eat, to procreate, to do all this stuff. Without it, some people just forget. People are busy. People just forget and just starve to death.
I mean, there are many work days that I look down and go, it's 2:30. I did lunch. Oh no.
I mean, being hangry, it could be a lot more than just low blood sugar.
Yeah.
Low oxy.
It's your hormones going, what the heck, man? Feed me.
But
I need some love. Get some food.
I think maybe I missed the kernel of the discovery. Is it, what is the sort of revelatory
that by
thing?
Injecting oxytocin into the starfish, they expelled their stomach out of their mouth like they were trying to eat something, even though there was nothing to eat there.
So there was no known connection between oxytocin and feeding behavior.
Right.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there you
not prior.
Starfish are weird.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I will move to close out the Animal Corner on a late breaking piece of news that Kiki sent me that I love.
Late breaking.
This just in.
Oh, wait, it's my turn again?
No. So caterpillars, this is a study looking at the peppered moth. So babies of those caterpillars that can change color in relation to the color of sticks that they are on. There's an extra wrinkle to this. Researchers took 300 larvae of these peppered moth in the lab. After they grew up a little, the scientists put them in different boxes with different artificial sticks painted black, brown, green, or white. Then they blindfolded some of them. How, you ask? With black paint. The blindfolded cat, all for the name of science. These things happen.
Yeah.
The blindfolded caterpillars their body color to match the stick they were sitting on, as well as their seeing counterparts did. When they placed the caterpillars in boxes containing different colored sticks, about 80% of the larvae, equal in both blinded and sighted larvae, chose to rest on sticks that matched their body color. So in this case, whether they were blindfolded or not, they changed their color appropriately or selected the right stick appropriately. What the heck is going on? Well, as far as we can tell, the genes responsible for vision are coded not only in their head, but also in their skin. So they have really bad eyesight through their eyes. We already know that. They sit on branches with their heads tilted away. So the eyes are not always on their branch, even when they're not blindfolded. And this, along with the fact that it takes them a while to change color, means that they could be sitting targets if they don't move to the right leaf, if they take too long to change, or if there's nothing close to their current color. So the hypothesis here, based on this information, is that they evolved a dual sensing mechanism for color to allow them to have a leg up, or in this case, many legs up, on the hunters that might be trying to eat them. So they are able to sense colors not only with their eyes, but with their body. This is an assumption we're making based on the genes that were found for vision and the fact that these blindfolded caterpillars could change their color.
That's kind of amazing.
That's pretty cool.
And I'll just remind you also with starfish that we were just talking about, they can sense light and dark with special feet on the tips of their arms. So this is something that other invertebrates can do. They can sense light. There's even vertebrates like there are lizards that have a third eye, quote unquote, on the top of their head that can sense light and dark. So if we're talking about light and dark, there are lots of precedents in the animal kingdom for other animals that have vision type sensory structures other than eyeballs. But this is particularly interesting.
It is. It takes it to the next step. Not just light and dark, but frequency of light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What would be in the skin? It seems like they would be able to see that pretty clearly. Maybe what is in the skin that it allows it to be sensitive to light.
Who knows?
I mean, temperature was one thing, but
yeah, it could be temperature. It could just be a wavelength sensor that they might not be seeing color, but they're somehow having some sort of hormonal reaction based on the wavelengths hitting their body.
But it really matches the color.
Yeah,
of the stick.
It really matches. It's pretty incredible. Yep. I mean, if I'm blindfolded or somebody throws paint in my eyes, I am not going to be able to figure out like what color the walls are. Or
that's why they don't run experiments on podcasters.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a few ways you could test this. So you could take a caterpillar and you could put it in like a lucite box, and you could shoot wavelengths at it. And see if they change colors. You could change the temperature in their space and see if they change color. Adjust all these different things. Find if there's a hormone release that's happening, and kind of try to isolate exactly what's going on in their body when they're changing colors and go from there. But it's a very exciting first step to kind of see what's going on there. Is it something that's maintained when they metamorphose into moths or butterflies? Wow. We don't know.
Wow.
So many questions. And I think that we need to take it to the break so we can come back after the break and play What the If. We're going to do it. I'm so excited. We've had fun reporting on all the stories and talking about them and kind of percolating these ideas a little bit. So we're going to take a quick break, and Philip and Matt are going to put their heads together proverbially and figure out which stories we are going to paint into our scenarios. What are we going to if? We'll be back after the break. You'll find out when we find out. Stay tuned for more This Week in Science. Thank you for listening to This Week in Science. We would love to let you know that if you have not subscribed or heard of the What the If podcast before, you can find them at whattheif.com. They also have a Twitter, What the If Show, that you can follow. Philip is pretty prolific there, tweeting out some fun things on his Twitter, on their Twitter account. But whattheif.com is where you can find more about the What the If podcast. As for This Week in Science, You know, we love your support. You are amazing, and you keep this show going by helping out, by telling people about TWIS, by supporting us, by buying our merchandise on our what is it? We have a marketplace. We have a place where you can buy the merchandise. You also can join us in our newsletter. You can sign up for our newsletter. We send you a newsletter once a month. Also, our Patreon community. You can support us by becoming a part of our Patreon community and supporting us with a once a month donation that really allows us to keep this show going, pay the bills, do the things we need to do when Google throws us a curveball to keep the show going. Also, going to those podcast directories like the Apple Marketplace, like the Android or Google Play podcast directory, Spotify, Spreaker, wherever you listen, leaving a review for TWIS is also something that is very helpful. There are so many ways you are already helping us and that you can still help us more to grow and to do better than we do today. Go to twis.org to find out about all these great options. Now, let's get back to the show because I'm trying to move things forward.
Can't explain things you've heard.
And we're back. You're listening to This Week in Science.
We are back, and it is time for that part of the show that we like to call This Week in What Has Science Done for Me Lately? So, I'm putting you on the spot here, Philip.
Yes. What has science done for me?
What has science done for you lately?
Science flew me a lot. I speak English. I've been flying a lot. And whenever I do, I never fail to appreciate the science involved in making that happen.
And there is so much.
Yes.
So it's the thrust, the lift, Bernoulli's principle is at play, but really it's those big bad jet engines.
Yes. Actually, you know what? Okay, so that was the lighthearted one. I will say, on a deeper note, I've had on different sides of friends and family and on different coasts, people I've known have become ill. And not like the flu, but like more serious things. And I was actually just talking to a friend of mine whose wife is sick currently, and he has a blog where he writes. Actually, there's a site called Caring Bridge, which I hadn't known about before, but caretakers can give updates and things like that, and you can communicate. It's like a private social media thing, and. He loves science. We are very similar. We grew up together. We even have the same birthday. So we're both science nerds, and neither are scientists by trade. But naturally, as happens, you get thrown into some medical situation, and suddenly you're learning an enormous amount. And then he's reporting. He has been a reporter and is an excellent writer and has been writing this blog. And so I've been reading like all this medical stuff, which I had no knowledge of before, and it's very calming in two ways. One is that, as Merlin says to King Arthur in The Once and Future King, if you are sad or worrying or stressed out, learn something. Learning something is a foolproof way to feel better. Never fails. And I always thought that was a beautiful thing. And he's telling that to Arthur when Arthur is a young boy. And it's calming in many different ways. One of which, when you talk about what has science done for me, is the notion that there are all these people have done all of this work to generate all this understanding. And it's always somewhat limited. It's never as enough as you would really love. But to know there's all these people doing all these different things is an incredible thing. And then just learning science, I've always found this, actually learning it makes you feel better and more empowered, should we say, in the world.
It does make me feel better too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder. Thank
Science
you.
heals.
Science heals. Matt, we had you on the show.
I don't mean to throw too much shade on that, but
Throw shade on science.
I have heard that the biggest difference between an optimist and a pessimist is that the pessimist has more knowledge.
We can talk more about that in the after show, but I have a lot of rebuttal to that.
We can after show that for sure. I do feel like
there was also something being neither optimist nor pessimist.
Middle of the road.
It's more about the
that's what I
lens at
feel.
which you look through things, and if you have other people to talk to about it, is actually what it's about.
Oh, all right.
Like TWIS every week.
Every week.
Hey! We'll make you feel better. Matt, we put you on the spot a few weeks back when you were on the show for an interview about your book. But do you have a quick what has science done for you lately?
Yeah, I can't remember what I said last time, but we just got a new puppy a few weeks ago, which is super awesome and exhausting and disgusting in all sorts of different ways. But she got her shots. Yes. And so a couple of weeks ago, super worried about her biting a squirrel that might be rabid or picking up distemper at the park. And now I'm not. And it's actually this kind of visceral relief to just be calm about it, right? This little purple shot gets put in, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, my puppy's going to be all right.
Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going. Thank you. Yeah, and also it's your dog will be protected. Your puppy will be protected. Also protect other dogs and animals around it. It's all part of that herd immunity.
Yep.
Oh, for anyone out there, if you have a what has science done for me lately, please write me a note, leave it on our Facebook page, This Week in Science, leave us a message there, or send me an email, kirsten@thisweekinscience.com. And as you might have heard last week, you can also do it as a haiku. We've had sonnets and we've had songs. Be creative if you're feeling up to it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And now, speaking of creativity, oh my goodness, I am going to hand this show over to Philip and Matt. There you go. It's all yours now.
Done.
Lead us into the world of what the if.
All right. Well, I think we started off with chimeras, so it seems like we got to run with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, mixing. So, what the if you mixed? You'll be able to say this better than I can, more properly scientifically. But what the if you could put human and primate cells? Well, I guess you're putting human cells into a primate embryo. Is that's what it was?
So I think that's the current state of things, right? Is that we're sticking human cells into other animals, and I think the goal in all of this is to get a monkey to grow a human pancreas, right. And then we take the pancreas out and put it in a human, right? So it's all about saving lives. But I suspect, from what I know of humanity, we're going to very quickly start doing the opposite and start taking animal genes and putting them in ourselves, right?
Would that be good?
Well, I guess this is the if, right? So I don't know. What can your cat do that you wish you could do?
Oh, I would love the genes for the tapetum lucidum so that I could see better at night.
Oh, that's great. So that's a perfectly straightforward one, right? So that's this membrane that sits on the back of cats' eyes, and that's why they get that eerie reflection in low light. And that seems like that should be a pretty straightforward thing to stick in, right?
So I have a vision one too.
Yeah.
I want mantis shrimp eyes so I can see what is it, 12 different kinds of color cones. So not even just I could get my actual normal color vision, but I want to see all the colors.
Wow. I'm colorblind and I already felt inadequate about that. That's just incredibly pathetic. Wow. That's amazing. But first, what's this? Here's I'm really confused. I come at this from a really ignorant place.
Brooklyn.
Washington Square, SmackDown.
Call the burn unit.
Washington Square 1, Brooklyn 0. Shots fired. So we just became a morning radio show for some reason. What I don't understand. So you have I can imagine a primate embryo, so a monkey embryo. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yep.
Maybe a particular. And okay, so there's that, and then you take some human. Are we talking stem cells?
Stem cells.
Sort of.
Yep. Okay.
Cells that can become anything.
Yeah.
So how do you make that a pancreas, or is it it's a little bit further along, so it's
right. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. So if you just put stem cells in the very early embryo, then you get an organism that grows with a smattering of human cells throughout itself. So you could have
not so helpful
part of the brain with some human nerve and some rat nerve, a mixture, or a monkey, human monkey brain, human monkey heart, human monkey everything, all mixed up. Or the situation could turn out that if you put it in a little bit later and you have something that is a more specific stem cell, like a stem cell for a liver or a pancreas or nervous tissue, that it would specifically become that. Mm-hmm. And you would put it in also at a stage you hope that it wouldn't be engulfed and rejected or eaten up by.
Yeah. It sounds like
embryo.
until we do that, right now there's laws against it. It sounds like maybe China's letting people go further, but until we do that all the way through and let the monkey grow up, we have no idea how adaptable. Right. When we transplant human to human things, and I suppose with animals too, you transplant an organ that's already within that species, it can be rejected.
Yes. So if it's with there's the immune system issues of rejection, but you're thinking if it's very, very early in this embryonic state, it most likely won't be rejected by the immune system. It would just potentially be not enough of a force might
not work right.
Or to become dominant in a particular area of the body.
Yeah, because it's no fun to have, as you say, sort of cells spread out through the body, right? Because then you just get like a half rat person, and we get enough of those on the subway, so you don't want that, right?
No.
You want a specific, human liver inside an otherwise monkeyish monkey. So you can then take it out and use it for our own nefarious purposes, right?
So I'm going to guess this is a long way, no matter what, even if they're doing this now. This is like an enormous amount of experimentation and knowledge that needs to be gained before we get to the point of like, we now have the right batch. We know how to mix the ingredients properly so that we get that pancreas that we want.
Right. Yeah. There are the specifics that are still needing to be worked out. Some of the interesting studies, though, that have worked are not in embryonic tissue, but in, say, mouse and rat brains. We have transplanted human brain cells into mouse brains while they're very young to see what would happen. Well, what's going to happen to these human cells in the mouse brain? And lo and behold, they do just fine. They connect to other mouse brain cells. They do what brain cells do, except they have human genetic instructions in them. And there is a little bit of evidence from the behavioral tests on these mice that they are a little smarter, better, faster.
All right. I don't know. Is that kind of a dig on us as humans that our brain cells are essentially indistinguishable from those of mice? That's kind of a bummer.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, and I might be, one of the interesting things about it is when you put this human stem cell in a location, you're putting it in a location that was to become an eye. For instance, it still becomes an eye. You put it in a location that was to become a liver, it still becomes a liver. So there is also signals from beyond what you're putting in that are telling it and instructing it what you're going to become.
Mm-hmm. And then just to be clear, what happens is in order to we are harvesting organs, right? It's like, now you want that pancreas, you have to take it out of that monkey, and the monkey doesn't survive.
Right, which is a whole nother thing of, how people are going to feel about that, which we could have a very long conversation about, do you like modern medicine? Because that happened at the downfall of various animals of various types, So, but I do feel like there's a lot of people that would feel very itchy about that idea.
Yeah, but I should say we're touching on some of that already. So, I have a friend of mine who needed a heart valve replacement, and he's got a pig valve in there now.
Yeah, but people eat pigs, so they're more okay with that.
Oh, sure. As opposed to
So when you're talking about monkey pancreases, I feel like some people are going to get really upset about that.
Yeah, that's probably the monkeys.
That's why we need to start eating monkeys. So that way it'll make it okay.
So facto.
I think that's a problem already, causing some issues.
Oh, yeah, that's right. This is a little Ebola thing.
They make it worse to get better. So now the big question is, everyone wants to know what we see. This seems to lead to some sort of sense of consciousness, even though there wasn't. I didn't really think of that until right now. It was in my subconscious. But so the monkey. Or even stranger, when you put the brain in, you really get bizarre things. So like that mouse or a bigger, let's say a primate, you put human brains into a primate. How many cells do you need? We have no idea, right? Does this monkey start to become more sentient?
So the question, does it become more sentient? So at what state in our neurological development, our evolution, did we go, I'm human, and suddenly start, running around, having language and all that wonderful stuff?
That's right. This would let us answer a whole bunch of long-standing philosophical questions, right? So we get 1,000 mice, and we put 10 brain cells in the first one and 20 in the second one, and so on. And then we find out how many human brain cells you need before the mouse becomes self-aware.
Right.
So we may have actually already done this. There is a genetically bred mouse called the Doogie Howser mouse. What? This is what it's called. That was designed for greater intelligence and managed to escape. And is in the wilds now at this point. It's one of the very few lines of genetically altered mice to have escaped a facility.
Wow.
And so Doogie Howser mice are somewhere in nature right now as we speak with a higher than average amount of intelligence.
Okay, so now so to keep it moving, what we do is, so we've and this is sort of a mini episode. So we've laid out some of the basic science and the questions here, right? So we go forward, and now we've got primates with probably like we would want as many human organs in them as possible, right?
Well, for transplantation purposes,
you don't want to waste an
good
animal.
crop.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. The brain is
just need to keep them non-human enough to still be able to harvest them.
Which is that question of like, you have an axe.
That's
you
the
have an
fine
axe.
line.
You replace the handle. It's still the same axe. You replace the blade.
Right.
Is it still the same axe?
There's this, the classic philosophical paradox is called the ship of Theseus paradox, where you take a ship and then you remove one plank and put a new plank in, and then you take another plank out and you put the next plank in. At what point does it become a new ship, right? You agree it is. So at some point we've got a monkey that's going to be so human-like that we would think of it as a human.
It seems to all come down to the brain, though, right? I mean, it's like if we left the monkey brain, just because it has all these human organs, we would not expect it other than I think there is the fascinating idea that actually our consciousness comes from not just the brain, but like
the idea of embodiment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So the entire the things that might control their hormones and things like that, you might want to stay away from that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Even
Replace the
potentially the
thyroid.
gut, you might not want to mess with the gut because the microbiome, you don't want to mess with that too much, because these are the things also that impact a lot of our cognitive function.
So one interesting thing that could happen is that, let's say they say, well, let's never touch the brain. As long as we don't do that, we're fine. But then it turns out that actually by changing, you get to a certain number of a certain percentage of the monkey has become made of human parts, that it, for instance, can fire a gun or figure out, it's Planet of the Apes, right?
Or it can use a keyboard and type out Shakespeare, right?
Right.
That would be a big time saver if the monkeys could just type Shakespeare instead of the randomness. Jeez.
I mean, we do want our pets to be able to speak, right? I mean,
Do we?
I think so.
Well, it's funny. One of my cats, I would like to have a conversation with. The other one, definitely not.
I feel like there's a lot of cats that would just be a constant stream of swear words.
Exactly,
right?
just profanity nonstop.
Then
Hilarious.
there's a lot of dogs out there that would just be, hey,
Squirrel.
hey,
Squirrel.
hey, right? So I'm not sure.
It's like Jeff Garland's wife. I forget her name on Curb Your Enthusiasm. But she's just constant like that.
So the speaking question is an interesting one, right? Because there's of course, an important part of speech is the brain, but speech also involves the lips and the tongue and the shape of the larynx and the throat and the lungs. Would it be possible to get a monkey to speak like a human without changing everything? In which case, you've just got a human head on top of a monkey. Right?
So we did a study
that's what I
on
see in
the
the mirror.
show where they were able to manipulate the larynx of a macaque, which is a monkey, not an ape, where he could say it didn't sound good. It sounded nightmarish and terrible, but he was able. They were able to manipulate this. This monkey to say "I love you" or something like that. It's terrifying.
It sounded something like "I love you."
Yeah, so it's kind of a proof of concept that the physical structure is present in the larynx and the throat for human speech of some sort.
All right. So in that case, I have not the slightest doubt that people will start making chimeric pets that can talk. Because it's such an obviously horrible thing that we have to do it.
Yeah. Now, by the way,
something worse though. It's also once you can do it. Once you can do it, you would because so many people think of their own pets as their children, or are their children, or are their families. Right. If you had a child who, at the age of 5, you had to make a decision, allow them to continue in their development, or just not do anything and keep them a 5-year-old forever. Some people will think I'm stunting the growth and progression of my pet by not allowing this to take place, right? Or not having decided this ahead of time.
They might be they might come across as incredibly enlightened. They live in the moment. Right? They're just like, hey, whatever, man.
Other long-standing philosophical puzzles will get solved very rapidly.
I think also people will have less pets because once your dog is telling you, hey, I want to smell your butt, you're like no, let me smell your butt. Like, it's saying this over and over again. You're just like, okay, I'm never.
No, but see, it wouldn't. They would just do it. They're not. Only humans are like, I'm going to tentatively do. So the animals they just go for what they want. But I must mention that we had Alistair Reynolds on, one of the great living science fiction writers, one of my favorites of all time. And that was just unbelievable. And so in one of his stories, I won't say which one, so it's not a spoiler alert, but in one of his stories, a man they figure out how to sort of, take your consciousness and put it in other people or whatever. And this accident happens and this guy winds up with his mind inside a dog and he's trapped. So he has all his ability to think, but he only has the dog body. So that kind of thing could happen too. The animal might feel that way at a certain point, you know.
But I should say, speaking from the middle of Manhattan here, there are many people with lots of disposable income and obsessive pet tendencies who will certainly make their chihuahuas as human as possible. And the dog park will be a nonstop cacophony of let me smell your butt, let me smell your butt, let me smell your butt.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking dog therapists will actually have to do something.
Right. You have to do some work. Also, they will have to see a therapist because that's it.
Also, they'll be dogs.
The dog therapist will be dogs.
Yeah, the dog therapist will be a dog.
Did you smell his butt?
If I can pay my therapist,
smelling butts make you feel.
If I could pay my therapist in dog food, that would be fantastic.
That's true. That would be a big cost saver. Yeah.
I tried it, and the insurance just they don't go for it. So here's the thing: the unintended consequence of this, because it's a little bit of a science fiction thing. The unintended consequence, I believe, would be the philosophical change. I think that the animals would, because they have completely different experiences, right, and completely different way of they're just. They're truly alien. They would present ideas to us in ways of being that I think could be good or bad. Well, but I think that would be the real mind blower.
Yeah, I have a feeling it would be really judgy because we've only judged our society through all of the diversity of opinions and the widescape of ideologies. We've only really evaluated humanity from the perspective of humanity.
Yeah.
To have some outside that could be really shattering.
Yeah. I mean, there's this famous philosophical essay by Tom Nagel called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" and the sort of suggestion is that the experience of the world via echolocation is so different than what we get as human beings that even if a bat could talk, you could never have meaningful conversations with it. And I would love to know if that was true, right? If we could actually sit down with the mantis shrimp and say, okay, so tell me about all those other colors.
Yeah.
And the mantis shrimp is I just can't do it, dude. Sorry.
An octopus, I mean, would be amazing.
I'd love to know. An octopus would be amazing. I'd also love to know just goldfish. How long is their memory, really?
Yeah.
How about little birds that are attacking their reflection in a mirror?
Oh man!
Yeah.
Who are you attacking?
Yeah, being able to reason with
mad?
animals would be really helpful. Like being able to tell your dog that's freaking out about going to the vet, no, but you feel badly. I want to make you feel better.
Yeah.
So you have to come with me. You're going to feel better. Or, like
or
telling
even I have to walk outside for
hey,
5 minutes. I'll be back. It's okay.
Yeah. Or like,
good luck, though.
There,
I mean, raising children, it's
dangerous.
No.
Don't go over there. People will try to kill you over there for your ivory. Stay over here.
I do think the level. So if you're just getting the ability to speak, you're not increasing the comprehension level or the intelligence level of the animals.
That's the question.
So we talk about dogs maybe having the equivalent intelligence level of what, like a 3 to 5 year old. So think about trying to reason with a 4-year-old about going to the vet.
But another
You'll
unintended
get a lollipop after.
But another unintended consequence would be, isn't it? We believe that language is sort of like a bomb that goes off, and suddenly there's this feedback loop of, because you have language now, you can learn more, and then you can learn more, and do all this kind of stuff.
So would it increase their intelligence?
Right.
And there's lots of animals that have language that we've discovered, or syntax, or different regional dialects. So there are some. There's some brain spaces already carved out for some of this stuff.
I tell you, one thing that's going to be truly just horrifying is that they are animals, and Werner Herzog has a great line: "Is I'm paraphrasing, but it's like there are people who look, and I'm doing a terrible accent. There are people who look at nature and think it's all beauty and peaceful and wonderful. I see strangulation and death and murder, and
Nature's scary.
Talk about all the ills of humanity, racism, hate, violence, greed, that would all exist. However, the positive thing too, what poetry would your dog say to you? It would, right, with the incredible amount of love they would have. So,
well, and depending on what cows were able to say, I suspect vegetarianism would become much more widespread than it is today.
Perhaps.
Or they're maybe really hateful.
Or maybe they're really jerks, right?
They're jerks.
Yeah. That's my feeling about chickens.
Cows are responsible for many more deaths than sharks every year.
That's true.
Yeah,
It is true.
but only a few more than dogs. So here's the thing then. If we're doing this unilateral, like across the board, we are now outnumbered. And if anything, the animal kingdom would first begin to speak about would be the threat to all of them, to all of their health and safety and prosperity of the humans.
Right. And
We
interestingly,
can't let this happen.
right,
Yeah,
they
that would
are
be
like,
awkward.
that's like movie Aliens, in fact, right? Aliens in movies always have a very simplistic, animalistic kind of territorial thing, whatever it is, just must kill. So, but they're
with the badgers,
Suddenly the animals come to us and say, okay, we've decided we need to sit you down and talk with you about this climate change problem. You're really not doing sustainable things.
Yeah, the frogs are really upset.
You're affecting our ecosystems, man. Come on.
yeah.
Do you really need your electronics that badly?
Right. Here,
That's the
but
question.
the
Will
animals,
they have an intervention for our civilization, or will they just destroy us utterly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they'd have an intervention for their civilization.
They'd be like, I heard you're working on terraforming other planets. Why don't you get going on that? Get the heck out of here.
We're actually going to
Mind.
That's
Tardigrades have already started the moon.
You've got a deadline. You need to be off by this date or it's over.
actually,
Your
the
lease
animals,
is up is the thing.
the animals develop a space program because they learned the tardigrades were marooned on the moon. And they're like,
Go to rescue them.
we got to go, or they're hungry. They're like, they may be delicious, whatever. But yeah, they
Send
have
them
to
lichen.
go.
But unless we give
Like a
them all
Berlin
opposable
airway.
thumbs, we're going to have to do the majority of the work for them still.
Well, that's a question, right? I mean, if the language thing is here's what I imagine, and this is a more positive thing. It's would be like suddenly having all kinds of alien species suddenly here, because like let's imagine that all the animals could speak, and you have a really wide spectrum of intelligence among them. It wouldn't just be like, oh, they're animals, and so they are all that way and we're this way. There would be this crazy wide spectrum. And I do believe some of them would very likely be more intelligent or just have perspectives that we have not even ever been able to comprehend. Right?
So, interesting question for everybody here.
Yeah.
The thing about your mate that most attracts you to them,
She might be watching.
is it their body or their mind? Answers out loud, please.
Are we putting this feature into a monkey? Because that's going to get weird fast.
Well,
Yeah, and then
no,
also,
no, no.
Justin,
What
you
I'm
need
saying,
to
yeah.
clarify.
I had the opposite, but this is interesting.
You go first.
This is interesting.
Looks dangerous,
I was-
Indy.
The mind, right? You're
I
going to
was
say the
thinking
mind.
that, if a mind is
The
the thing
mind.
that most attracts you to your partner, is that
Not
who they are
physically.
and the way they think and talk, and not a physical attraction, you could become attracted to a whale.
Oh, no.
Oh, I am attracted to whales.
Well, I mean, in a different way.
But hold on,
if
but you're
creating-
forgetting an
you're talking
element of
Matt, we're
attraction.
talking about a sex chimera, though. That's maybe even a more interesting, a dog level intelligence in something that has all of, and maybe multiple, maybe extra features.
No, maybe
you
it would
didn't
be
even consider at first.
just a platonic love.
Yeah.
Platonic chimeras.
Because
Well,
there's
this is the
still,
thing about the
there's still
alien world is
processes.
that the alien world is anybody can interact and talk and communicate and team up and do stuff. But there's going to be attraction. There's going to be a social side to having a Star Trekian world or a Farscapian world where there's aliens of all different sorts. And you don't really necessarily know how compatible you're going to be until the
real problem.
The space skirt is lifted.
Right.
This is a very colonist perspective of like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to conquer it, you know,
that
way. But I think there's
get
an element of this that, you know, you talk about attraction, but we're all, you know, those of us that are in relationships, there's a long-term attraction and there's a partnership side of attraction. And yes, all of us at this stage would say it's the brain, but any of those brains in a package of a particular sort in the first couple of dates probably wouldn't have gotten there. And so there still is a physical element that is biologically important. We want to pick somebody that has physical traits that would mix well with ours genetically. We want them to smell similar, but different.
Right.
We want them to have particular signals of evolutionary strength. So there's all this stuff there that actually is really important that would keep, I would imagine, most humans, I'm not going to say all, but most humans from being attracted to, say,
So Blair,
I don't think that would be a bad thing.
If you're the man who you're in love with had a third nipple, would you have rejected him outright? Would you have rejected him outright if he had a third nipple?
No, but if he were a cow, I
what
would
if
have.
he had 6 nipples? Okay, we need to find the line. What if he had 6 nipples? Would you have said, no, I'm ending this relationship now. You have 6 nipples. I can't live with this.
Perhaps.
Well, okay, but not a definite no. Okay, so back to 2 nipples. He's normal again. Oh, but he has a tail. Have you now rejected
a little
him?
bit of a tail.
I'm just saying.
Yeah,
there's especially once you're more accustomed to a diverse species of potential mates.
So,
like these lines stop being so clear.
And I
think
what we're talking about here is as a chimera, right? How much of these animals right now we're talking about, okay, the brain has been chimerized enough that they can speak. They have enough of that. They have the brain tissue to speak and to produce that speech. But what else has been chimerized? Is that it? Have we, like we were talking about, the chimerization of various organs in the body? What other things? We're talking about how similar when does the animal become human?
Become too human.
And we have officially ended up
does it happen?
talking about BoJack Horseman. Yes,
it is the BoJack. It is
that is where we now are.
What? I don't know about that.
It is a Netflix show where all humans live in a world where there are also animals that are bipedal and speak like humans, and it's just a normal society. And there are birds and horses and dogs and people all living together and having relationships and all this sort of. This is exactly what we're talking about.
That sounds really. But do those animals have completely different ways of seeing the world because they're animals, or is it just like a Disney thing where they have?
They're just no. It's more of like I guess it's more of a Disney thing where it's like they're pretty much just humans, but they look like bipedal animals.
I think that what might happen, we have, for instance, you can look at our society is fortunately becoming more tolerant of things like gender fluidity, right? And I think that you could very likely have species fluidity, or you certainly would. You would at that point, right? They would literally be mixed up. And
if it were to go that far, well,
that's what we do with the if, right? We just keep going until we're driven mad.
But it would go that far. I mean, if it can go that far, humans will push it that far.
Well, I should say there's a sense in which this if is actually making me kind of grateful. We have some regulation on chimeral experiments, more than, say, an hour ago when I was thinking, oh, that's great that in China they get to do these things. But I'm thinking maybe it's good that we're taking it easy.
And let's not forget, we might just be able to 3D print these organs at some point.
Yes,
which would be a lot less messy.
We could 3D print them. The other possibility, I mean, do we have to fully grow these organisms. We have the development of the lamb bag now, which is like a fake womb to grow for growing babies, human babies who are potentially preterm, that it can, if they're substantially preterm, that we would have these fake wombs that they could grow in. We could be even growing chimeric animals, or the majority of their bodies, for our organs in these lamb bag type structures. The other issue, though, the reality of if we could do this, it is but the reality is that the genetics of all of this is where things don't work so much. So as we said earlier, a lot of the human cells didn't stick, like the human pig and the human cow chimeras. There were not really robust human cell populations in these animals. They were there, but they were not strong, and they weren't taking over, and they weren't really creating what you would call a more humanized organ or a more humanized pig or cow.
How long have we really been at this?
A couple of decades.
Million years.
A million years.
A couple of decades, time-wise, but also, and the number of people who are working or allowed to even work on this, because the restrictions and everything. This is an unexplored avenue of science. So the success rate as it stands now, I say, is meaningless until there would be an actual ability to put a big effort behind it.
I don't think these regulations are going to mean anything. I mean, it's becoming easier and easier for people to do things, and if you really want to know it's not great, but people are going to start to do these things.
In the 50s, you could buy a monkey off the internet, not the internet. Kids may
not know about that.
You could mail order, the back of magazines. You could mail order animals, and a monkey would show up at your house or whatever. Kind of animal.
Fortunately, there's lots of places you can still do that in America.
You can still do this. So, hey, you're mail ordering your animals, and you've got your DIY bio set up in your garage, your CRISPR kit. You're going to consider humanizing some of your animals in your backyard. At a certain point, there is the regulation. Where does the regulation step in? How do we control where we're going? And there is the question also of different societies and what they see as okay. Whereas Americans are very individual focused. I need to do this. In China, it's more society focused. There's, in terms of the communist perspective and the way that their entire society is ruled, it's better they want to do this research and create these chimeras for the health of their whole society. A few people may die, a few animals may die, but it's kind of water under the bridge. Whereas in the United States, even though we let people die all the time, we're like, no, life.
Yeah. Well, and there's a whole side of animal cruelty, which Americans get very focused on. Yeah. So that's something that could be a concern in a backyard or garage-based I think experimentation like this.
It's like short-term emotional things versus long-term.
But the question of, the global conversation of ethical aspects of what if we did this? How far can we take this? Who's gonna let it happen? And are different countries going to, say China continues to allow it, say the United States rolls back regulations even further, keeping us from doing even stem cell research that we're doing right now? What's going to happen to our science? What's going to happen to our medical technology? What's going to happen to the industries? Where are they going to go?
There's going to be some weird Dr. Zhivago out there. Oh, yeah. I mean, there has to be. There probably already is. Yeah. Well, just somebody who's doing these crazy things, and then they're going to escape and something like that. I must say, again, in the slightly more positive zone, I would say the Last Jedi, the most recent Star Wars movie, had a beautiful theme of companion. I think it was that one. It might have been the movie before. There was a beautiful theme of companionship among every partnership, or whether it's a relationship or just Chewie and Han Solo. they were looking at that, and then there was a theme, and Star Wars actually doesn't do science fiction that often, but there was this story of, I think it was young Lando, right? And he's in love with a robot.
Yeah,
the robot, and then her consciousness gets put somewhere. I don't want to give it away, but like all of these things is like they really tried to investigate that, and even the notion of attractiveness, like the robot was clearly not,
So there is a threshold, though, that we have to keep in mind about giving intelligence to these animals that doesn't require regulation, which is that for every doubling of our brain capacity as humans, it required a 6-fold increase in blood. I'm making it up in the exact numbers, but it came with a much larger blood flow to the brain to keep that organ alive. So it's not as simple as giving folds to a brain or allowing the morphology of the creature itself will massively come into play. And there is some evidence that evolution required bipedalism. The largest brained, most intelligent dinosaur was bipedal. The modern humans' bipedalness, large brains may have come from having run and created this sort of blood pump of pushing blood up through the body as we ran around on these fleshy feet that weren't meant for being in contact with the ground. So even if we do somehow genetically increase the brain capacity, if they're on low blood flow, they're not going to get that far.
But they're going to wear blood tanks.
Right? Yeah, they're going to be
like going diving.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I have to say. I would be remiss if I did not mention. Language ability and intelligence are not the same.
Ooh, this is a great point. Yes.
And there are animals that are very, 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 very intelligent, and in some cases potentially smarter than us at certain things. But because they can't speak with us about it, we don't always know about that, and we don't always assume that. And just because they could talk, just giving them a language center that is capable of human speech, that doesn't necessarily make them smarter. And they still might be really, really smart already.
What you're saying is then the sort of combining both of our ideas, you wouldn't be able to get the giant brain because of the blood flow, and you wouldn't be able to have all the capacity.
Blood tanks.
Language ability is completely already present in a magnificent way in many animals. We would be in that scenario where we're talking about animals being able to communicate to us just animal thought.
Yeah,
just animal conversation,
and that's kind of the thing. There's
science would change.
Well, animals would be doing science.
Many experiments we're doing, and we're like, well, I wish I could do that experiment, but I can't just ask the animal what they're thinking.
Turns out we can. Yep.
And actually, the animals would start doing experiments, and their ethics. What are the ethics of animals? That would become a real question.
How can I eat that? I feel like that's high on the list.
Well, in fact, they do eat us. They eat us anyway, and then they're integrated into society, and
How do we eat that? How do I wear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I see on Instagram all the time.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's we've really come that far.
We've come so far.
How do I ride that? See, this is like
we like to think that we are so far advanced over the rest of the animal kingdom. Are we?
Well, we would continue to. I trust we would maintain that attitude no matter what.
No matter
in the face of any evidence.
Language.
Yeah.
I think they might be smarter than us already.
Yeah, their movies would be amazing.
Their movies would be amazing. They would scam us out of all of our money.
Yeah, that's right.
They would outcompete us for all sorts of resources.
A question for the scientists: is it? I'm not quite clear on how far we're away from. Is it that by using animal, or by doing this whole thing by using actual animals, sort of like using already existing natural creatures to do things with us, is that still way easier for us? It's sort of like mixing software and wetware, whatever, mixing wetware and things versus building, we can create DNA, we can create creatures, I assume. But it sounds like we're much further away from that ability to create creatures from scratch versus just mess around with these plug and play these parts.
Yeah. I mean, we're still in the, our synthetic biology abilities are still fairly basic, and they're advancing incredibly rapidly. But yeah, we are still we can maybe make a little bacteria. We're not at the point where we're like, hey, grow a person. We can't do that.
I think if I could take your question and I could tweak it just slightly, my question would be, which is more worthwhile in looking at making chimeras or genetic editing?
Right.
And I think that's more, both of those are moving pretty quickly. It sounds to me like genetic editing is a lot. It is at the same time sounds easier and more achievable, but also is more dangerous, because in these chimeras, I would assume they're going to have a really tough time reproducing, because they won't have a complete genome that will complement another individual's necessarily. So it's going to be hard to continue that genetic line. So if you make a chimera and it doesn't work out and you're like, then that's kind of the end of the line. But if you do genetic editing, there's an opportunity to pass that along. So there is actually an added danger of that getting out and changing the landscape. So I think even though genetic editing might make more sense and be easier at this point to isolate specific things you want to change, it also is kind of higher risk.
Yeah. It's higher risk unless you're in a family. It's higher risk unless you're in a family that has had a genetically inherited disease that's devastated your family and been like the curse on the family for generations going back. If there's something within your genetic line that your parents and grandparents and great grandparents have had, maybe different diseases on both sides that maybe you have or haven't inherited, but maybe your kids did or whatever, then the idea of gene editing isn't this big risk to society in your mind. It is how my family survives. And that's who's going to be making the decision ultimately on whether or not to do gene editing is people who are facing things like a congenital disease.
I mean, that's what we're looking at most likely. I mean, there's the, next step, the Gattaca aspect of, hey, you're not tall enough, pretty enough, smart enough, whatever. We have to fix that. Or, you're not going to make it. We have to make sure that we edit those genes before your child's born to give you that extra edge. And there's all sorts of science fiction out looking at those possible futures of how that would work out. But I think what we need to look at these systems as they're tools. Gene editing, it's a tool. And the chimera process, it's also a tool. And these tools can be used for multiple different purposes. Yep. And so for research purposes, developmental biologists are like, oh my gosh, I can use gene editing to tweak things and see what happens when the tweaks happen. Oh, I can use chimeras to see how these cells develop in this organism where it's not a human, because I couldn't use a human for this research. So, I can see how the brain grows through this stage of development.
On human organs in a chimera. Sure.
Yeah, we could do all sorts of things with chimeras that we can't do with humans, and we don't have other platforms. So we're using organoids, so growing these little balls of cells to be these little tiny brains or little tiny multiple cell type little balls that we can do, but they're not the same as a whole organ. Right. They're not the same as a living organism. And so they're all different tools for different purposes. And yes, they can be taken to those sci-fi dystopia extremes, or they can be like, hey, we're going to learn a lot of really cool stuff.
Or sci-fi utopia. We could design an organism with intelligence that could communicate, that could survive better in space.
Like the tardigrade.
Cool. So that we ultimately, and knowing that humans are never, face it, humans are never going to have a good run on Mars. But could we design a life form that is intelligent that could?
No, we could design ourselves to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you call it ourselves, but it won't be us. Once it's that different, it won't be us anymore. But could we design an organism, an offshoot of humanity, a new human, if you like, that could survive perfectly well on Mars?
Yeah, that would be a really good choice.
Or in the depths of space. Philip wants to say.
I have a final question, which is how it sounds like to solve the. I don't take it at face value, even though it makes me very squeamish. Of, for instance, going back right to the original story, what the experiments that this scientist is doing in China makes me squeamish. But how do we actually begin to get some answers so that we can actually say if this is ethical or not? Or is there a way to bridge? Have we ever done that? Have we ever faced this kind of thing before?
We have, yes. I mean, with CRISPR, when CRISPR came out, the conversation, there had already been other gene editors, but with CRISPR, it was, people realized that what it was going to be as a tool fairly quickly. And so the international community started convening, and they have conversations. The scientists get together at conferences and talk about what they want to do, what they are doing. Regulators and policymakers come in also. Organizations like AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, will invite people and convene them for conversations. And the National Academy of Sciences will put out white papers on these topics. And so there are these conversations constantly ongoing when people realize it's going to be something that we should be talking about.
Yeah. It seems like it all boils down to the sense, what is consciousness? That might be an interesting spin-off from this whole question. That isn't what the experiments are about. But like to answer, that's what it comes down to. Is pain...
That's what we're afraid of.
Right.
Human conscious monkeys. That's what
or
we're
I guess
afraid
I mean, coming to understand how much consciousness... at what point is it okay to do strange things and what point is it not? We have no idea. We don't know because we literally don't know. Are they feeling pain? Are they distressed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you could come up with that reverse ethic where you're like, okay, the brunt of the research is going to be to make cows that do not have anxiety or pain.
Yeah.
So
zombies.
Zombies them more efficiently.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're like, you could go that other, and then you eventually end up with the pig who's telling you what the good cut of meat is.
No, you get you got psychopaths. You have psychopaths because they're just
completely psychopathic cows, as if they weren't already.
Yeah.
Moo.
Animals without anxiety. That would be like the most dangerous thing.
That would. I mean, they would all die.
Yeah.
And then there we had some conversation too about the sort of editing of a trait of beauty, right? Like we would be doing this sort of editing for a profession. You want to edit your next generation to be really good at information handling before the next level of quantum computers, in which it becomes totally irrelevant, that level of computing power they have, and whatever the trade-offs were. So then there's a risk factor in attempting to predict what the future will need from your children or what the perception of beauty will be. Because at some point, once everybody has figured out what this ideal beauty of is, and then the one person who wasn't edited, who has a face that is not completely uniform on both sides, becomes the ideal of beauty because they are so rare in society and nobody else has ever seen this.
You're
before.
describing that episode of The Twilight Zone where everyone has the pig faces.
Yes, exactly. Right? So there is a danger if we're doing this predictive thing on what's going to be good for society.
Right.
But I think if you take it down again, back it all back to the basis of thinking of it as a vaccination, which we all agreed was a good thing.
That's cool.
If we're using gene editing in an effort to vaccinate the genome against hereditary disease, I think that will be it's both the argument of anything that you say that is for the protection of your children, people can agree with, even if it's been couched, even if that's only being used as a ruse to get people to buy in. That is the thing that will cause the buy-in to this eventually. Is
and
that
with
your
these
next
chimeras,
generation?
it'll be the protection of your pets. your pet
Yep.
children.
That's right.
So to wrap it up, when we wrap up the if, I like to say what have we wrought? And that is simply by having experienced this extrapolation and this experiment. And for me, I look to what can I be grateful for? And that is perhaps that what I thought was a very complicated world is not that complicated compared to the way it could be. And that maybe we can actually be grateful for not knowing a lot. I want to know all these things, but the road between here and there is going to be
a little
extremely chaotic. Yeah. What the if?
What the if?
Can I get everybody to say the name? This is what, at the very end of our show, this is not the end of our show. At the end of
We
TWIS.
call out. Yeah.
But we look into the future and we have no idea what the if would be. There are so many possible ifs. And so we scream together the name of our show. Like what?
What?
Uh,
Exactly.
Where was that feedback now?
That's right.
I know. Now you need it.
Hit that button.
So much feedback. So much fun. Oh my goodness. Thank you for running us through the if. We do love
That
the
was a
speculation. It's so fun. And to be able to come from one of the stories and spend some time really going, what? Let's think about this a little more.
Yep, exactly.
I'm always amazed
So
where we
much
wind
fun.
up. We've now visualized things that we would have never realized. we were
Yeah,
going
and what's really incredible at
Different
this too
people's
is like
perspectives too.
I now realize that there is this spin-off of every story we do that could be a what the if. that
Oh
could
no, what have
continue.
we done?
This is why we scream. This
That
is
was
why we
just
scream.
That was just one story.
Yeah.
We'll see you
That was
next
just
week
one
for our
story.
show
There was
that
so
is
many
6
stories,
hours
and week
long.
in, week out, there's so many stories that come across the table here, and any one of them could be a whole episode.
I know.
Of,
We didn't even get to the stomach of the starfish for this.
Yeah,
what
that's
the
right.
if.
So maybe
Yeah.
this is something that Justin can just have a separate released content where he just waxes about
All of the stories.
scenario.
Sure.
Scenarios. That's right. We have come to the end of our show. Thank you, Philip and Matt, for bringing the What the If podcast to This Week in Science.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. This was really great.
Yeah. Huge. I mean, being able to do this with all of you guys was fabulous. So much fun.
Yeah, we'll have to make this make this maybe a thing we do on occasion because it's too much fun. Everyone who is watching, thank you so much for joining us live. I would love to say thank you to Fada for helping out with our show notes, also our chat room and social media. Gord for helping in the chat room, the main chat room, making that thing go. Identity4 for recording the show so that I can have more of the audios. Yes, thank you so much. And I want to give a big shout out to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Paul Disney, Richard Onomus, Ed Dyer, Stuart Pollock, Philip Shane, Ken Hayes, Harrison Prather, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Craig Landon, Mark Mazzaros, Jack Hall, Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill Kersey, Bob Calder, Patrick Cohn, Eric Knapp, Richard Hendricks, Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Aiden Jeff, John Bertram, Mountain Sloth, Seth O'Gradney, Steve Alberon, John Ratnaswamy, Dave Friedel, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Paul Ronovich, Corinne Benton, Sue Doster, Dave Wilkinson, Ben Bignell, Richard Porter, Paris Anthony, Kevin Reardon, Christoph Zucknarek, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Sarah Chavis, Artyom Diochev, Clifford Ramus, Paul Sampson, John McKee, John Olds, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lisa Slazewski, Jim Drapeau, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Ben Rothig, Steve Leisman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie Cohen, Gary Swinsberg, Robert Coburn, Greg Briggs, Brendan Minish, Christopher Rappin, Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hessenflow, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, and EO. Thank you for your support on Patreon. And for anyone out there who is interested in how you too, can become a Patreon supporter. You can find a link at TWIS.org. On next week's show, we will be broadcasting live online at 8 p.m. Pacific time at twis.org/live and also at our YouTube channel. You can watch and join our chat rooms there. But if you can't do that, don't worry, because everything's archived and saved for later. And there's also a podcast. You can also find all those wonderful episodes at twis.org.
Thank you for enjoying the show. If you're interested, just Google This Week in Science anywhere in iTunes, or Google it in Google, for that matter. And seeing as you are listening now, just keep coming back to however you found it this time.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org. That's TWIS, as in thisweekinscience.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the host, that's us, or other listeners. That's all of you.
That's all of you. But if you don't want to talk to all of them, you can contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, what will happen, Blair?
Oh, I do believe your email might be spam filtered into oblivion.
It most definitely will. Or you can also just hit us on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And I want to say, I just want to say also, if you want to find the What the If podcast, where do we find you?
On Twitter at What the If Show, and our website is whattheif.com. And you can submit your own ideas to be ifed.
Yeah.
We have some amazing guests.
Whatever you want to change about reality.
Yep. We have some amazing guests coming up. And by the way, everyone who has their idea ifed, if it becomes part of the show, you get a finger puppet of a great scientist or science fiction character.
I love it.
Check it out.
And if you've learned anything from What the If, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science, This Week in Science, This Week in Science, 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 This Week in Science, This Week in Science, This Week in Science, 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 This Week in 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 Science.